Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to this great international group. My name's Paul Minot. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this Ridesharing Institute conversation. What a great international audience we have today. Nonprofit and international, the Ridesharing Institute was incorporated in the USA in 2011 as a 501c3 charity. We currently have board members in the USA, Germany, and New Zealand. Our purpose is to reduce emissions while improving transportation equity around the world. We do this by encouraging more carpooling and van pooling. Our objective is stronger policy at all levels of government to encourage more pooling sooner. The sooner we increase pooling, the sooner we get the benefits of reduced emissions. We invite collaboration and sharing of knowledge. So welcome to this conversation with Clabburn from the UK and Anais Enrico from France to tell us the state of pooling in their countries. So our first speaker, I'm going to introduce Clabburn. He's the chairman of Mobility Ways and the founder of LiftShare, the UK's largest carpooling network, working with over 700 organizations. LiftShare started in 1998 when Anais struggled to get home from university. In the last 25 years, they've gone on to save its millions of users over 1 billion miles of vehicle travel. In 2021, Anais founded Mobility Ways, which is now the UK's leading climate tech provider for decarbonizing commuter emissions. A passionate advocate for the sharing economy, Anais regularly consults with the government with a view to reducing the negative environmental impacts of the commute, most recently being a contributor to the Department for Transport Decarbonization Plan, which I'm sure he's going to tell us something about. Now, hopefully this is going to work. Anais is going to share his screen and we'll be away. I'll turn it over to you, Anais.
Great. The thing I've realized today is that if I have a blue screen, I look blue at this time of day. So I'll quickly move on to a different color screen, but delighted to be here. Thanks, Paul and the team, for inviting me. Really excited by the work that the Ridesharing Institute are doing. It's absolutely essential that we do campaign for more support for pooling, because right now the world is in crisis and sharing is one rapid solution that every country around the world can adopt. So let me just try and move on. Okay. So I just want to start off with the political context in the UK. So we've been at this game now for 25 years, and up until 2 years ago, there wasn't a single policy that our government has had in that time to encourage carpooling, or as we call it, car sharing in the UK. However, a couple of years ago, the government released their decarbonising transport plan, which had 2 sections that were very relevant to our work. One of which is specifically about the need to increase car occupancy, and the other is around engaging with employers to help them on decarbonising their commute, which is great. In that document, it talked about all sorts of political actions that we're excited about that are about to happen. They were talking about demonstrator projects, funding employers, having very clear occupancy targets for employers and local authorities, and legislation to basically mandate employers to get involved, and providing a toolkit for local authorities to help them with their change. However, in the last 2 years, pretty much none of that's happened. We've had a toolkit that got released last year that gives some guidance to local authorities on what they can do for lift sharing, but very little else, in spite of us literally meeting with our government every month and them talking about all the things that should be happening. Nothing has yet happened. So it's frustrating, but it is exciting that it is at least on the table as one of the options for them to do. Why is it important in the UK and everywhere else? Well, car occupancy in the UK, from this graph you can see, has been on the decline since the 60s. It was over 2 people per car back then. It declined all the way down to 2000, and that's across all journey types, whether it's leisure or commuting or whatever. And since 2000, it has carried on a slow decline. These very small changes in the graph may seem minor, but each 1% change is 2.5 billion car miles going back onto UK roads. And in the pandemic, when occupancy in the UK dropped by 4%, that's the equivalent of basically decarbonising all of our buses. in terms of the impact that's had on emissions in the UK. So it's a very key metric, and one that up until a couple of years ago, our government were completely unaware of. And now they're starting to talk about how they can encourage local authorities to at least measure their occupancy. Also important to say in terms of lift sharing in the UK, it is not niche. It is now the second most common way that people travel to work. With walking has been on the decline for the last 20 years. Lift sharing has stayed static, but it's actually overtaken walking now. So people drive alone to work and then they share cars. Really interesting to see the stats from France, about 1 million people carpooling to work. In the UK, it's 3 million. So it seems to be more in the UK for a similar number of commuters, but I don't know quite why that is. But the really exciting thing, as we all know from our work in this area, is that so many more people could be doing it. So at the moment, it's 10% of commuters carpool in the UK, 90% from our research we've been doing, where we've analysed over 1 million commuters, 90% of people have at least one person they can share with at the same time, going to the same place as them, who live within walking distance of their house. It's over 80% from this analysis have at least 10 people that live within walking distance of their house that they can share cars with to work. 80% with 10 people or more. The map on here, the green dots are people with 10 or more living near them. And this is the same for employers up and down the UK. There is huge latent potential for change. A quick summary of where we've got to in the UK. So we've been going since 1998. Things really started taking off in about 2000, 2013, when we pretty much discovered how to best engage with employers to help their staff to share cars to get to work. And in 2019, we had about a dozen companies manage to get 30 or 40% of their staff sharing cars within the year that we launched their scheme. 20 to 30% of staff sharing cars within 1 year, because we basically found out how to market to people, how to engage with decision makers, and what incentives to put in place. So we had amazing success, and then along came the pandemic and basically put us back 6 or 7 years. But in that time, we've had over 1 million people join the network. We've saved £250 million for our members, and we've done this all self-financed. We've never raised money. We've done it all based on the income from our current clients. To talk you through one example, there are many, but Arup is a great one. Within 3 months, they got a third of their staff sharing cars to get to work within 3 months. So it was super quick. And they were one of the first clients to measure what we now call ASIL in the UK. ASIL is like a standard metric that any employer can use to talk about how their emissions come from transport and how they can reduce it. So your ASIL is your average commuter emissions level. If you've got 1,000 people and you've got 600,000 kilos of carbon, your ASIL would be 600. So for them, their ASIL was 838, which means that the average commuter emitted 838 kilos of carbon. Within 3 months, they got that down to 600 by introducing an effective lift sharing scheme. Moving on to a more community-based scheme. So this is Devon. Devon have around 12,000 members of their scheme, and they've been very successful in publicly promoting lift share across the county through a very simple method of having signs up in key junctions around the county promoting their car share scheme. They've got up to 92% awareness of the public. 92% of people know about their car share scheme. So as and when people want to use it, they're aware where it is and how to get onto it, which is why the scheme is so successful. And they, as you'll see from this table, have saved nearly £7 million for a scheme that they've invested about £100,000 into. So it's a pretty good return on investment. Obviously, individuals save lots of money. In the UK, we've got far more regular sharing than we have for one-off journeys, and our regular members save around £1,000 a year on average. Some people save much more, some less, depending on how far they travel. So this is just a quick map showing where we were. This is in 2002. We had journeys across the UK, but mostly where we were promoting with London, in Norfolk and Bristol, and up in Liverpool. And since then, the network has grown a lot. There are now people offering seats on pretty much every route in the UK. But we did peak in 2019, and then the pandemic hit us, and our availability of journeys more than halved overnight. It's on the rise again now, but it's still lagging where we were, which is frustrating because we were really flying in 2019. Interestingly, there's lots more members of the public that are joining than through the client schemes. So clients are still slightly reluctant to promote car sharing to their staff.
Oh, for instance.
So Paul mentioned that when we set up Mobility Ways, so Mobility Ways is set up to focus much wider on the commute than just purely on carpooling. And since we've done it, we found it an amazingly, we're much more successful in working with big corporates. The CO2 reductions is clearly a goal for them right now, and we're able to help them measure, reduce, and report their commuting emissions. And they've transformed our business. We've doubled our company within the last 2 years since launching this service. And the reason it's important is we uncovered that 5% of all UK emissions come from commuting. So unless we decarbonise the commute, we will fail our net zero goals in this country. And it is essential that all governments, local and national, and employers get involved in this journey. So we launched Mobility Ways to focus specifically on this, and we've created a new science around it, which we call commutology. And it's all around working with partners, with researchers, with companies to really understand the essence of how to achieve zero carbon commuting at a local and national level. Various tools we've used which are relevant to carpooling because they highlight just how good it is. One is a tool called scoping, where we analyze all the travel options available to every member of staff and then show how they can get to work other than driving on their own in a car. And it is very typical, as in this client's case, for 95% of staff to have a good lift sharing option. About 55% of people could go by bus or train. About 40% of people can go walking or cycling. So it highlights that although at the moment 80% of people drive alone to work, there are options available to everybody. We also survey all of our client staff, and that highlights not just how they're traveling, but we ask them how they used to travel and what would encourage them to change. And what's really exciting for carpooling is that it is already the one option that many people would consider. But when we ask them, could they be encouraged to use it through, whether it's through incentives or through whatever solutions you can come up with, that number jumps up to over 60%. So over 60% of people right now could be encouraged to car share, but then the question is what would encourage them? So we ask that question, and luckily for us, the top result that comes out in every survey we do is if I could find someone who I can share my journey with, who's traveling on my route. So that's when all of us service providers come in and say, we can help you do exactly that, so we can overcome that barrier. And interestingly, for this client, only 35% of people said nothing would encourage them to car share. So the rest of the people are the people we can go after. And because we've surveyed them, we can see who they are. And because we've also done the scoping, we can see how they can travel. So if there is someone they can share a car with and they said they want to do it, then we can very easily target them with our marketing campaigns. So with lift sharing, as I said right at the beginning, 10% of UK people currently car share, but 95% could. And if they did, that would be a 35% reduction on commuting emissions in the UK through empty capacity that is already there. With walking or cycling, although 42% of people could walk or cycle to work, if everyone did, that would only save 6% of the total emissions, because walking and cycling journeys are so short, and the vast majority of emissions come from longer car journeys. So if you get everyone to walk and cycle who can, and everyone to use public transport that can, you'll only actually save 16% of total emissions, whereas carpooling has potential to save 35%. We've also analysed every local authority area in the country to see how occupancy levels vary depending on where you are. And it's really interesting to see that those areas that actively engage with businesses have much higher lift sharing levels than those that don't. And also areas of lower income have higher levels of sharing than those that don't. So when people need to share cars, they do. And when they are promoted car sharing, they do too. Latent capacity in the UK. So we've got 36 million empty seats in the UK every rush hour. That's a huge latent capacity. And we've only got 15 million commuters. So we've got 36 million empty seats, 15 million commuters. So there's plenty of spare seats for everybody, even if you had absolutely no public transport at all. So huge potential. We've typically got 11 drivers for every one passenger. The worst area is Richmond in London, where they've got 23 drivers for every passenger. And the best is in Leicester, where they've got 6 drivers for every passenger. If everywhere in the country had the same car occupancy levels as Leicester, we'd save, I mean, I can't remember the figure now, but a massive amount of CO2. Obviously, sharing cars isn't just about saving money. You can have a lot of fun. And that's the stories we get from our members every day. It's just phenomenal. They love it because it helps them save money and save the planet, but it also, they've met some amazing friendships along the way. In terms of what we found works in the UK, and I'm pretty sure most of these will work wherever you are, the thing we've learned is if we just try and promote carpooling, it doesn't work. If you use data to show how carpooling compares to other options, you've built a much stronger business case. And you can also show how convenient it is to people by showing them just how many people are near them. And so by being very clever with the data and targeting individuals you can share, you can have much greater success. We found our employer schemes work really well, and we've become experts at helping employers to promote schemes to their staff. But also within the UK, because of the way our network works, we've got a public network with 500,000 people on it already. So if any company joins a scheme, individuals can choose to share with the public or just with their members of staff. So they've got a pool of people from day one that they can share with. You've clearly got to make your audience aware of what you're doing. Aim for 100% of your audience. If you only 5% of people know about your carpooling scheme, only 5% will ever use it. Aim for as many people as possible, and obviously keep it relevant. What else have we found impacts the levels of sharing? Well, fuel prices, clearly. It's really interesting to see this trend graph. The blue is the fuel price, and the pink is the car occupancy, and they track. So up until the pandemic in 2020, they were following each other year on year. But because like basically we were told not to share cars in 2020, 2019, it fell off a cliff. So our job now is to encourage people back into carpooling. Other things that impacted, sorry about the quality of the slide, is we've got various cities in the UK now with congestion charging, workplace charging, clean air zones. Wherever you increase cost, you increase sharing. And the impact on London of the congestion charge was huge. Average occupancy, as you see here, went from 1.27 to 1.42, which is basically a 20% increase in occupancy, which was massive. So just to summarize, really, the policy recommendations we're going after our government for at the moment are to replicate in England what's happening in Scotland, where they've got a very clear goal to reduce car miles by 20% by 2030. That's a really good goal because it means you can do that either through public transport or through pooling or whoever, but it's up to them, the local authorities, to take that goal and to implement whatever changes they can. And so at least then carpooling is one of the options. If they say we want to increase bus use by 100%, that excludes carpooling. A second one is a very clear goal to increase car occupancy. We're recommending at least 1% a year across the UK. Ideally, it wants to be at least 2%. But at least if you've got a goal of 1% a year, they need to start measuring it now and know what the baseline is, and then go up 1% a year. We need to go up 4 or 5% just to go back to where we were in 2019. So there's quite a lot of work to do there. And also, I'm loving seeing what's happening in Italy now, where it's becoming mandatory for employers with over, I think there it's 100 staff to report their commute emissions. And we're lobbying very hard in the UK to adopt that too, because if companies start being told they have to measure this, they will all start taking measures to reduce it. The QR code that's in the corner there, that's for our most recent commuter survey. We do a commuter survey every year with around 10,000 respondents, and it throws up some really interesting insights into how people are commuting and motivations to change moving forward. And that is it from me. I hope that was of interest, and very happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ali. I think we'll move on to Anais Enrico, who went to ESSEC, ESSEC Business School in France, and then joined Roland Berger in Morocco, of all places, as a strategy consultant, where she worked for governments, multinational companies on various topics such as health and women's rights promotion. Anais joined Caros Mobility 1.5 years ago to accelerate their international development. She's going to tell us a bit about what's happening in France in a policy sense, and a bit about Caros Mobility. Anais, can you share your screen and make your presentation?
So first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here today. I would like to start with an overview of carpooling for daily commuting in France. France has been a pioneer in carpooling, especially thanks to BlaBlaCar, which has made carpooling popular since 2006. But since then, a whole range of carpooling services has developed, particularly for commuting trips. These solutions can be categorized as follows: organized hitchhiking with, for instance, Réseau Pouce instance, carpool lines like Ecov or Illicov, static carpooling like Mobicop, La Rouverte, and of course, dynamic carpooling, which is what is offering Carros Mobility today. I will detail the technology we are offering a little bit later. The success of carpooling in France relies mainly on a supportive legislation, allowing us to offer very attractive financial incentives. It's what we call the co-funding model, and it's based on two main laws. The French mobility law that allows LTAs to fund carpool trip just like public transport, and the forfait mobilité durable. It's kind of a mobility budget which allows employers to provide a budget for mobility for their employees, and this mobility is tax-free for employers. So for instance, if I'm a driver, I will earn €1.50 per trip per passenger, and if I'm a passenger, I will only pay 50 cents, and the gap will be paid either by the LTA or the employer, or sometimes, depending on the region, they may even split this amount between the LTA and the employer. And this is possible thanks to the law on mobility, which is a law that only exists in France and that is very supportive for carpooling. Of course, the rising fuel costs have very strong impact on carpooling in France, and you can see the very strong development of carpooling since last January. The number of carpool trips have been multiplied by 2.6 in a year, but this is only the beginning. Why? Because the French government has announced in December a very ambitious national carpooling plan that has been officially launched in January. And this carpooling plan provides a budget of 150 million euros for 1 year to encourage the practice of carpooling in France. I would like to present you the 3 key measures of this plan, but there are many others. And the first one that is very impactful in terms of usage is the 100 euros bonus for first-time drivers. So what does it mean? When you are a new driver using an official platform, and a platform that is listed by the government, you will earn 100 euros after having made 10 carpool trips. And you will earn at least 25 euros for the first trip. And then every company can split between the first and the 10 carpool trips. So for instance, with Carros, when you do your first carpool trip, you will earn 50 euros directly on top of the money you will earn from the passenger. And after the 10th trip, you will earn again 50 euros. And this has a very strong impact on usage. I will show it right after. The second key measure is the financial support from the state to local transportation authorities to fund the financial incentives. The one I just mentioned before, the gap between the price paid by the passenger and earned by the driver. This amount will be paid half by the government to encourage LTAs to provide these financial incentives. And finally, another dedicated budget is provided to support carpooling infrastructures in the country, especially carpooling areas and carpool lines. And this is the results after only 1 month of this national plan. So you can see that between December and January, the number of carpool trips in France have been multiplied by 1.4. And when we compare with January 22, we multiplied by 3.5 the number of carpool trips made in a month. So definitely, financial incentives are a very strong lever to encourage the practice of carpooling, and Caros, among other platforms, really benefits on this supportive legislation. I would like also to present a little bit our technology and our vision of carpooling, because at Caros Mobility, we are working on this topic for many years. So in a few words, Caros was created in 2014 by Olivier Binet and Tristan Croiset to provide a sustainable mobility solutions in rural and suburban areas, where driving a car is most of the time the only way to go due to a lack of public transport. So for many years, they worked on the technology. We invested 8 million euros to develop a unique AI-powered carpooling app that is acting as a smart mobility assistant. So with our technology, we are able to learn daily mobility habits and to do prediction of trips because of the recurrency of commuting habits. We are able to predict the next trips with 80% of accuracy. And with all the data collected, we are offering optimized door-to-door itineraries that are even intermodal. Because at Caros, our vision is to provide a new kind of public transport. We want to transform all these empty seats into seats like a bus seat. And for that, we need to provide we need to offer a full integration of carpooling into the local public transport. So concretely, this matching technology have these results. On average, we offer 18 carpool opportunities for each commute. We provide a very reliable solution, as almost 99% of the booked carpools are made. And we provide flexibility that is very key in our model, because we are not creating couples of carpoolers. We want people to be able to carpool some days, not every day, not always with the same person. That's really key to encourage and convince people to carpool. So on average, our carpoolers are carpooling 5.5 times per week out of 10 trips, and they're carpooling with 7.6 different people. So basically, this technology enables us to provide a flexible, seamless, and reliable experience. And as I said, we see carpooling as a new kind of public transport that we want to integrate with local networks. And we do this through a triple integration. So first, intermodality, we integrate mass transit lines in the carpooling offer. So for instance, we will, as a passenger, you will start your trip with a carpooler, and then the driver will drop you at the train station, and you will join your office via the local train. We are able to do pricing integration as well. So for instance, in Ile-de-France region, when you have a transit pass, a Navigo transit pass, carpooling is included in your transit pass. You don't need to pay for the trip, and the region is paying the driver for you because it's included in your subscription. And finally, we are providing a ticketing integration. So we can, for instance, generate QR codes that you can use both in carpooling and in the bus. We have, because we are benefiting from public money, we have developed a very high anti-fraud algorithm to be able to detect fraudulent behaviors. So I can detail it if you want later on, but it's very key for us to build trust with local transportation authorities and to be able to prove that we are funding real carpool trips. I would like now to show you the impact of carpooling in the Paris region, for instance. So before deploying a carpooling network, you can see here in green the mass transit lines. The public transport was able to serve 36% of Paris region inhabitants. And after having launched the service, we are now able to serve 91% of Paris region inhabitants that have now access to this new kind of public transport network. In a few figures, so we have a community of 700,000 users. We raised 15 million euros, and we have especially the support of the European Commission as a direct investor of Caros via the EIC fund. We have a B2B business model.
Ridesharing Institute.
So we partner with companies and local transportation authorities, and we are now active in 4 countries: France, Germany, Denmark, and Algeria. And so basically our development model is based on a licensing model. So we have a technology that is the Caros mobility technology that we license in white label in other countries. So we are able to adapt a little bit the technology to fit with the market and with the local mobility habits. But we have, for every country where we deploy our service, we have a playbook based on our 8 years of experience, how to convince people, how to nudge users, how to involve companies and public services to promote the service and to communicate with the right arguments on carpooling. So basically, it was my presentation. Happy to answer your questions. And if you want to follow our developments, you can follow our LinkedIn account, Caros Mobility.
Anais, thank you so much. I have a feeling you did that presentation in what's not your first language, and you did a fantastic job. That adds an added challenge, just like trying to get people to carpool, I guess. Thank you for that. Can I see, can you stop sharing, Anais, so I can see the crowd? Put your hand up if you'd like to ask a clarifying question of Anais before we start our more general conversation. I think that is such interesting material, and interesting how slightly differently things have gone in France versus in England, in the UK. Okay, let's see. We've got a hand up. Caleb Winter.
Thank you. Great presentations. Anais, I was curious when you said earlier that regions, I assume you mean transit agencies, are paying part of the carpool tab. I'm curious what subsidy is the range of payment they make per user, and how they justify that as a policy compared to transit. Like in America, we have a lot, the US, we have a lot of transit agencies that don't have full seats, but I suspect in Europe, there's a lot of full seats already on transit. So it makes a little more policy sense to also fill those carpool seats.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So first, in terms of subsidies, it depends on the local transportation authorities. So for instance, in Île-de-France region, when you have a transit pass, you don't pay for your carpool trip as a passenger, and the driver earn on average €2 per trip, €2 paid by the LTA. If you don't have a transit pass, you will pay 50 cents, €1.50, sorry, and the region will pay 50 cents. And why are they doing so? Because we see ourselves as a complementary solution of the existing transit network. And we developed many features to prove that we are not a competitor of public transport, especially if you can make your trip with 100% public transport, you cannot benefit from the subsidy as a passenger. So subsidy is here to provide a complementary solution for people who don't have access to the local transit network.
And that can I just jump in and say that's a specific to your project? Yes. Your service, or is it?
Yeah.
Okay, not generally to other similar services.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other? I have a clarifying question for you, and then I want to ask the same question of Ali, and that is a question of whether, when you report these numbers of people participating, are we reporting a carpool driver and a carpool passenger as two-part carpool trips, or are we reporting carpool passengers as the carpoolers in your numbers?
So for Caros Mobility, for instance, when we say that we made 7 million trips, it's passenger trips. So we count the number of passengers, but on average we have 1 passenger per car. So it's basically the number of carpool trips.
Yeah, but you're not counting both the passenger and the driver.
In this case, no, we are counting only the number of passengers.
Okay, great, thanks. And I'll ask the same question of Ali as well. Is that the case for your statistics, Ali?
Because in different places it's explained different ways, so there's always definitions alongside it. But when we say we've got 100,000 carpoolers, will mean both the driver and the passenger. If we talk about 100,000 passengers, we'd be the passengers and drivers too. But we try and be clear, because it gets very complicated, or not complicated. It's easy to get the numbers wrong, because with carpooling you generally go there and back. So you have 2 trips. So it's actually 4 people trips, 2 car trips, 4. So you've got to be very clear on your definitions when talk about your numbers.
Yeah, and there are definitional differences around. Jesse Glazer has got his hand up.
Thanks, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of information, an avalanche. I'd like to focus and ask you for a little more information about the government subsidies to carpoolers. If I heard you correct, both UK and France are offering that. Could you say a little more about how the subsidies are channeled to carpoolers? It sounds like in France it's paid directly to drivers, but Ali, I wasn't clear about how it's all happening in the UK in terms of subsidies for carpooling. Could each of you explain maybe a little bit more, perhaps provide a reference? Thanks.
Yeah, so in France, everything is paid via our app. So our drivers and passengers, they both have a wallet. And the passenger at the end of the month, he will be paid directly via a wire transfer. And the idea is that he can use the wallet if he wants to turn passenger sometimes, because our goal is to convert people, to convince people to let the car at home and to become passengers some days. So they can decide to be a passenger, driver, or alternative. And if they are an alternative, they can some days be a driver, some days be a passenger. So this wallet enables that. But basically, everything is made via the app. It's paid via the app.
Mm-hmm. Does the federal government then put money into individuals' wallets? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, via Caros. So we bill them, and then we have directly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ali?
And in the UK, it's easy. There's no subsidy. We have no subsidy, no funding, zero. There's never been a penny of money going into carpooling in the UK. The money that's come has come through from clients who promote the scheme to their staff. Some of them offer incentives, so some offer like a free coffee every time you car share, but there's no government funding going into carpooling in the UK at the moment. But I would love them to be doing what's going on in France, because I think France are leading this so well. There's obviously been grants. I mean, in the States, you've had grants for pooling and stuff over the years, but nothing as I see on the level that's going on in France at the moment. It's really making other governments sit up and listen to what's possible, because in the UK we've got our government seems to focus on technology and infrastructure, but not on behavior change. And I think what's happening in France is showing if you invest in behavior change by incentivizing it, then technology gets investment, because lots of companies spring up to start making that behavior change happen. So it seems to work in a much better way over there. It's exciting.
Leo?
Yes, I have a quick question. How well, or have you, Ali and Anais, that your carpooling function incorporated into the MaaS app or platform in your respective region?
Yeah, I can go first. Of course, integration with MaaS platform is key because we want to integrate carpooling in the multimodal, among the multimodal options. So we are available in MaaS platforms. For instance, we are partnering with Hakon for many integrations, but this is only for the first part. So as a passenger, you will be able to see carpool options, but then you will need, every time you will need to go to the app via a deep link to confirm your carpool trip. because the key step when booking a carpool is a chat between two humans. It's not like renting a car, a bike, or whatever. You have two humans that need to connect and to meet at any point. So we cannot move all the carpool experience in a mass app, but definitely it's a good way to provide this opportunity to more people.
Thanks, Anais. Ali, would you like to add anything to that?
I think very, very similar views. It's really important that carpooling options sit alongside other transit options, whether that's in a mass app or in Google or wherever, like spare seats should be available. But yes, because you're not buying a ticket from an operator that runs a schedule, you need to have the two people connecting, and you need to be agreeing to their terms, and so you need to do it separately. So equally, we've got an API that anyone can put in on their site to promote the journeys available, but then they need to come across to the platform to use it. And I mean, in the UK, I would have loved the investment that's gone into mass to have gone into carpooling, because it's been a lot of hype and very little success. And here we've had a lot of success and no funding. So it would just be, I think the two do come together, but I think carpooling is such an obvious, simple thing that it hasn't had the investment that some of these other more exciting things have, but they're really complicated, whereas what we do is really simple. So I think carpooling should be at the top of everyone's agenda before getting distracted by complicated integrations.
Couldn't have said that better, Ali, but you mentioned that your work with companies is about generally reducing, you're picking all the modes now for decarbonization, and you said that kind of kicked off your explosion of work. Is that, have I picked that up correctly?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, there's MaaS and what we call MIAS, so Mobility Information as a Service. I think mobility information is absolutely key. I think the idea of having a one ticket where you can buy everything, including lift carpooling, is much more complicated. But I think individuals should be given the choice and the information at the point they make that decision about all the options available to them, because in some cases it's better to walk, cycle, bus, carpool. Every mode has got its time when it should be used, and at the moment it's being promoted in silos, or it's getting overcomplicated within some mass things. So we have found that by offering the whole suite in terms of information about them, that very often carpooling comes out as the quickest, cheapest, best way to do it, but it is definitely not the best for everybody at all times. So it's really important to basically give it a level playing field with all the other options.
Great, thank you for that answer. Graham has had his hand up for a while. Graham East.
Yeah, hi. My question is about the involvement of employers and their employees. Obviously, it's much easier in large organizations where you have, say, 100 or more employees. There's bound to be some match-up between drivers and passengers. But how do you deal with much smaller employers? Because over half of people don't work for big organizations. They work in shops or quite small companies with 5 or 10 or 15 employees. So that's my first question. But the second one is coming back to the French example. You seem to be talking about it mainly in terms of individuals plugging into the system. Do you have a similar experience with employers or organizations as your sort of starting point to match people up?
Ali.
Okay, so great question. So we've tackled that challenge by having our free public network that anybody can use, whether they work for a one-man band or a 1,000 company. So anybody can put their journey in there and find matches. The challenge is you want a critical mass of users, so you need to then find ways to promote them. So the way we do that is through the work we do with local authorities. So they promote the scheme across their county, and that drives up the membership, which means that individuals can share. But also, because it's part of the network, if you're working for a big employer, you can choose whether you want to share with people from other companies as well. So you may give someone a lift from a local SME. We've also done projects on business parks and industrial parks where we've got lots and lots of smaller employers all in the same area, where we've combined them in under one umbrella scheme so that it's promoted as a unified brand locally. and someone takes charge of that locally to promote it to their audience. We've just done one with it was, I think, 40 companies, but the total employees are about 400 people, so an average about 10 people per company, and it's worked really, really well. And actually, we've used the data from that to show that there's enough demand for a new bus route, so they're putting in a new bus route into that location as well, based on the data from the mobility ways analysis we've done.
Thanks, great answer. Anais.
Yes, pretty same for us. So definitely, if you're working in a small company, you want to be targeted at the launch of the project. We have a development in several steps. First, we will target the biggest companies or several companies in the same area. And once we have a significant critical mass of users, then we will extend the network to smaller companies. But our biggest fear is that you download the app and you find an empty hub with no proposals. So we prefer targeting first places where there are many players, and then when we are confident in the number of users, we will communicate on the app for more people and smaller companies. Yeah.
Thanks, Anais. We have a question from Sanjeev Nanda.
Hi, I think my question is a simple clarification question for Ali. I was trying to understand this metric that they're using, ACEs, and I suppose it's a combination of trip and distance, but I would like to understand it a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay, so ACEL, there's an ACEL estimator that basically just uses travel plan information or travel survey information based on mode, and then takes assumptions of travel distance and frequency to give you an estimate of your ACEL. That's available freely on the Mobility website. Anybody can go in and work out their approximate total emissions. But what we now do is we use travel survey data, where we ask each individual how far they travel, how often they travel, and their mode of travel. And then for each individual, we work out their carbon emissions, and then we do that for the whole company. And then from that, we work out the total emissions. And then from that, we go the other way and work out the ACEL. So we've now got very accurate measures of emissions, because what we found was if we took the government assumptions of the average commute being 10 miles and the average person driving 3.5 days a week, every company was different. Every individual was different. Some individuals would drive, particularly now that you've got flexible working, will drive 100 miles once a week. So you can't assume they're going to be driving 100 miles 5 days a week. I mean, the world of commuting has changed so much. And we've actually found that even though the national ACEL is 600 kilos per person, for most of our clients, they're averaging at about 1,000, because most of the people we work with are typically out of town employers, whereas nationally, you've obviously got all the commutes in London, which are often much shorter journeys than there are around the rest of the country. So it's now got very accurate, which means that companies are happy to use it as their standard way to measure commute emissions, as like in their official carbon reporting reports, which has massively driven our demand for that service.
Thanks, Ali. Sanjeev, did that answer your question?
I think so. So it's based on surveys done by employers or done by you?
Most of them are done by employers on their staff. I saw one today where they had a 54% return. So I think it was 8,000 staff, nearly 5,000 responses. As long as we've got enough data for it to be statistically accurate. So I think for that number of people, we'll probably need like 800 responses. We've got 5 times that number. We can then use that as the metric to extrapolate up for the total number of staff going to that site. The other great thing about doing surveys is you can put a tick box on there saying, would you like more information about carpooling, or would you like more information about buses? And then you can target all the people that have said yes, who have a bus option or a carpooling option, and then go after them in your campaign, which has proved really, really effective, because you basically you segment your market and you provide really accurate marketing to them. And we work with lots of the bus operators to provide discounts and those kind of things for their staff.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Sarah Hendricks, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about how you prove that they're real carpools.
Thank you for your question. So we developed algorithms that are able to detect fraudulent behaviors. I can give you some examples. For instance, our algorithm detect if your trip is following the path of a transit line, because we have very smart people using 2 phones, carpooling with themselves, taking the local transport, and they can earn money very easily. So we are able to see, okay, it's exactly following the path of the local train, so it may be a fraudulent account. And then we have a team of people calling users during the carpool trip, asking, okay, can I talk to the passenger, not the driver, of course, but can I talk to the passenger? And most of the time, they just change the tone of the voice, and you can't imagine what they're able to do. But we are able to ban them from the app. And also we have specific behaviors, like if you accept a carpool trip within X seconds, it's a bit strange. So we can wonder if it's real people that ask for, that confirm the carpool trip or not, etc. We are able to detect also, because we are using geolocation, so we can see if 2 people are starting from the exact same point and stopping at the exact same point as well, etc. So many use cases, and we have patterns that we are then confirming by calling users.
Yeah. Thanks, Anais. That's a great answer. Sarah, did that help? Great, thank you. Martin, you've got, no, sorry, Christian's got his hand up.
Thank you for great presentations. My question is how you are managing to show for the user the carpool options in the public transit app. This is a technical question, maybe, and maybe I don't know, detect whether you do this also in the UK, if you are able to see the carpooling options in the normal transit offer. How do you do it, and what's the reason why they're not offering at the moment?
Very simply, in France, we have an API that is open for mass operators, and they are just like picking carpooling options and pushing them in the mass. It's pretty basic. And regarding intermodality, we are calculating it by ourselves in Caros app, but in the mass platform, it's the mass operator that is calculating the combination between carpooling and transit network.
Perfect. We built a tool called MyPTB, which is like a MIAS app to show all options alongside each other. And having done that, we then basically took the API out of that and then opened it up to other journey planner providers. We basically provide the top 5 journeys for any route that they put in. So if you say you're going from A to B, we'll search our system. If there are 5 options, we'll display them back to the mass provider, and they can present them however they want.
Caleb, you've got your hand up.
Hopefully a quick question, because I know we're wrapping up, but in terms of people using it who are old or young or disabled, is there any lessons learned or successes with providing trips for people with disabilities on these platforms?
So from our side, it's a topic that is definitely a topic of interest, but we are not able today to provide a solution for everyone. And we assume that for the moment, our target is people commuting. It's not a solution for elderly, it's not a solution for young people, but there is already such a huge market on commuting trips, so we focus on that for the moment.
Yeah, I mean, in our scheme has always been for everyone. So other than people under 18, you can join if you get your parental consent within LiveShare. But we've got lots of stories of people who use it because they can't drive, because they've suddenly been declared blind, or they've got epilepsy, or they've got some physical disability, and they turn to carpooling because very often where they are, there is no public transport option available. So people turn to sharing whenever there's a crisis. It just happens, whether there's a fuel crisis or any kind of crisis in their life, they do it normally with friends and family. If they haven't got friends and family they can share with, they turn to platforms and do it. And we've got some properly heartwarming stories of people who pull whatever their disability is. Yeah, I think there are some even up on the website. But we don't set out to being specifically for disabled or for elderly, but it just works for anyone who uses it. But our audience, I thought when I set LiveShare up, it'd be for younger males going to and from university. Our audience is very much typically 30 to 45, very much male, female, 50-50 split, slightly more women share than men, slightly more men join than women. Distances are typically longer, incomes are typically lower. It's not what I expected it to be, but then we just keep learning how people are using the scheme. It'd be interesting actually in France how, because of the subsidy, whether that's targeting a younger audience. I don't know how, it'd be interesting actually to compare ages of profiles of users, but ours is very much the working population. That's our target market, just like it is in France.
Anais?
Yes, working population as well. We still have very interesting results on campuses. So we have a very big pool of passengers in universities, but definitely the main population is workers.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
I've got a question for Anais. I had a meeting with our government team just yesterday, and I was talking about how wonderful France is and all the things that are going on there. And they were asking, how did they make that happen? What has happened in France to make there be so much public and government support for carpooling? Because it seems to be quite unique, and we would love to replicate that in the UK, but it's just the backstory behind where we are now. How much work has gone into lobbying or to campaigning for carpooling in France?
Definitely, BlaBlaCar did great work. BlaBlaCar is one of the most famous French startup, and the government is very proud of it, and so they did a great job to popularize it. And then many years of lobbying. It's been 8 years. Olivier Binet is pushing on it, and also we did a lot of experiments with our own funds. So, for instance, regarding the subsidy, we paid subsidies with our own money for a year to prove the results, and that has worked very well.
And the funding the funding's not from taxes on petrol companies or anything. The funding's just state funding. There's no
state budget. Yeah.
Great.
I have a question, a quick question.
Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. So I'm sorry I can't turn on my camera, but my question is about pickup and drop-off locations and how people are able to organize both the passenger and the driver, and if there are security issues for some people in terms of somebody, a stranger knowing where you live and where you work and that type of thing.
So for our side, we have set many rules, maximum, minimum of a detour for the driver, of walking time for the passenger, and then it's just matching and scoring, and we are trying to push first the best result as possible. And also we are asking our users to rate the carpool trip and to rate also the proposal, so that we are able to learn, to do machine learning and to improve the way we calculate the matches, including pickup and drop-off locations. So it's basically test and learn and improvements via the data.
Yeah, I'd also say that for us, we learned very early on that the most important thing is to get people talking to each other, because they know their own area, and you can have a conversation in quite a secure conversation without giving too much information. So our job is to help advise our users on how to have those conversations, because you know where best to meet, you know who you need to tell that you're sharing, you know where you're working, all sorts of things you can do that the system could try to do, but if the system tried to do it, it wouldn't do it as well as you do it yourself. So I think it's really important to not rely on the technology to do everything for you, but the technology is really good for matching and to facilitate the communication and provide guidance, but then to do all you can to get the individuals to talking and connecting with each other, because they're going to be sharing a car either one-off or regularly. So it's important to get that conversation starting early.
How well said. Martin.
Yeah, this is Martin from Germany. I wonder if you have some figures about the carpooling people that join in a carpool. Are these fixed pairs of people going together, or are they flexible and have a different partner every day? So if you have some numbers about how flexible people are.
Yeah, I was very interested in Anais saying that they had 7+ people in the week. So in the UK, it seems to be, well, pre-pandemic, it was very static. People had their carpool teams. They may be in 1 or 2 teams with slightly different people during the week, depending on shift patterns. There's more flexibility now, so people aren't commuting so many days a week typically in the UK as they were. So it's slightly trickier to make a 5-day-a-week commitment, but I would say ours are typically they wouldn't be in more than 1 or 2, and you wouldn't normally have more than 2 or 3 people in each car. Sometimes you have someone who has a minibus and they drive from Cambridge to London with 8 people every day, and they vary each day, but that's rare. I'd say most of ours are 2 people sharing pretty regularly with each other.
Yes, as I said in the presentation, our users are carpooling with 7.6 different people on average during the whole carpooling experience. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Christian's got another question.
Yes, and the Norwegian government has been reluctant because they believe that there will be much more passengers than drivers. But my experience in Norway is that there's actually more drivers than passengers. And early on, we had almost 30 drivers per passenger. But in active carpools in Norway now, it's maybe 60% drivers and 30% passengers. What is your experience in the UK and France?
I'd say in the UK sounds very similar. So I mean, roughly it used to be a third of our users were only passengers, a third of our users were only drivers, and the other 40% were happy to do either. Most of our users do have access to a car, so they're either their partners using it or they're taking it in turns with their carpool passengers. But probably a third of our users have no access to cars at all. So if they couldn't carpool and there wasn't public transport, they couldn't get to where they need to get to. So I would agree. We have plenty of capacity. Obviously, we could do with lots more and many more people, many more passengers coming on too. But generally, if you want to lift on the network, there'll be someone there for you.
Yes, sorry. I would say that it really depends on the region, because when we target very rural and suburban, very rural areas, definitely we have mainly only drivers, because everyone has a car. So we need first to convince them to let the car at home. When we target suburban areas, we have passengers that were users of public transport, but very long trip with many changes and so on. So here we can have more passengers, but I don't have the ratio in mind, sorry.
And we have Robin has asked a question.
Hey there, I hope you can hear me. I'm in the train. I was wondering, thanks for the presentations. I was wondering, how do you guys deal with the spontaneous, like, real world matching at the spot, like without the apps? Are you having any initiatives running in the UK or in France? In Germany, we learned people want to get remembered in the real world, like seeing in the visual environment that there is ride sharing happening. And we have this, so to say, Mitfahrbanke, like the points of share, which are indicated. And I wonder, maybe in France, who are more upfront, do you have an infrastructure, like an icon system, like which goes across organizations and across and providers who are indicating points of share? And how are you guys dealing with that?
If I got your point correctly, I would answer that we have carpool lines in France. It's not like carpool lanes in the US. Carpool lines means we identify specific carpool spots along a very frequent road, for instance. And then if you're a passenger, you can wait here, push a button, and there will be an indication saying, okay, a passenger is waiting for a carpooler here. And if you're a driver, you can stop along this road at these specific points. I don't know if it's what you had in mind, but it's something that is tested in France. It's not working very well, to be honest, especially because there is a commitment from the city for the passengers saying, okay, if you wait more than 10 minutes and you don't find any driver, we will send you a taxi. And so this solution is super expensive for the local transportation authorities, and we at Caros don't really believe in it. it could work if it's part of a broader carpooling network. So we are thinking about developing it, but only part of the whole network of carpoolers, not just a carpool line.
In the UK, there's no set infrastructure. We have, I think, a total of about 4 miles of carpool lanes. There's no park and share sites. There's very, very limited public infrastructure for it. Nothing like the slugging lanes or the sharing lines in France. Or I know in the Netherlands there are park and share sites spread around the place, which potentially are great, but you've got to get people using them. I think it's more about creating a culture of sharing, and then either doing it through a platform or just getting friends to more sharing with each other than necessarily having the infrastructure. But the infrastructure as a sign, if you've got signs everywhere saying carpool today, that's a good thing to have. So even if the locations don't get used, you're continuously promoting the idea out to the public, which is clearly a good thing.
Well, I think the time has come to wrap this up. It's been fascinating. Ali and Anais, thank you so much for preparing and presenting today, responding to questions in an excellent way. On behalf of everybody, great thanks to you both. I'm sure that people have noted down your email addresses and will probably be sending you additional questions. There may be some in the chat, and we'll make sure to follow those up. I will mention briefly that on the 4th of May, we will have our next Ridesharing Institute conversations, where we will hear from people in Germany and in Norway, I think, who are on the call at the moment. And so we'll look forward to that. We'll get something out to everybody, information about that in the very near future. So just thank you, and thank you everybody in the audience for being online and listening into this. We will have the recording available, and I think, forwarding a link to this recording to people in your government has got to be an effective way of communicating that, hey, this is something that is actually working somewhere. The main challenge I find is people say, oh, well, that'll never work. Nobody's going to share rides. So let's not, we're not going to bother. And at some point, sometime over the last 15 years, the idea of pooling dropped out of a lot of the discussions, a lot of the plans. It just fell away. And I'm mystified still as to why that is the case. But anyway, I think unless anybody else, just put your hand up if you do have a final question or comment you'd like to make. I'm going to call a close and thank everybody so much for your participation. This has been a very excellent event. All right, signing off. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.